Today's sponsor is Project Pals, an amazing collaborative workspace for students to create and work with projects. Stay tuned at the end of the show to learn more about getting started for free and how I'm using Project Pals in my classroom. Atomic Habits for Teachers and Students with James Clear, episode 381.
The 10-Minute Teacher Podcast with Vicki Davis. Every weekday, you'll learn powerful, practical ways to be a more remarkable teacher today.
James Clear has a new book called Atomic Habits, where you make tiny changes and have remarkable results. And I have been a newsletter subscriber of James's for quite some time. I believe, James, you have over 400,000 people on your newsletter list about habits, and you have a pretty remarkable story. How can habits change the lives of our students?
Habits, they're sort of like these repeated patterns and behaviors that are very easy to dismiss on a daily basis, whether we make a change or make a choice that's 1% better or 1% worse. Choosing to study for 10 minutes, for example, you don't typically have the subject mastered at the end of that night. But building a habit of studying every night can lead to remarkable knowledge over time. And so pretty much all habits work this way, where they're easy to dismiss, whether they're for us or against us, but they compound over time. And this is the remarkable thing about habits, is that they're sort of the compound interest of self-improvement. And so if you're able to understand how habits work and how to design them in your favor, then you can often design a much more effective, productive, and efficient life. And that, of course, is one of the primary purposes of me writing Atomic Habits.
But you've lived this. You had an accident in high school. If you just want to tell us a little bit about that, and then how habits transformed you into some pretty remarkable college success.
I suffered a very serious injury in high school. I was hit in the face with a baseball bat, and I cover the story in detail in the introduction to the book. But the short version is that I broke a bunch of bones in my face, suffered multiple seizures, couldn't breathe on my own, had to be air carried to the hospital. And the recovery from that was very long, 8 or 9 months. And baseball was a very big part of my life at that point, but I couldn't play for, a year, and I ended up having a very lackluster high school career. And so I didn't really have a choice. And what I mean is that I didn't really have the option to have some radical transformation or some big overnight success. I had to start small. And so because my hand was forced, so to speak, I focused on really tiny habits that, things like keeping my room clean, or studying for an hour every night, or making sure that I was prepared for class each day, or showing up at the baseball field, and maybe I wasn't going to be starting, but at least I could be prepped for practice. And I started with strength training and weightlifting consistently, all of these things that were I wasn't achieving any remarkable result on any given day, but I was exercising a sense of control over my life. And so the moral of that story is, after 5 years or so, I was able to make some impressive gains and ended up being an academic All-American my senior year in college, baseball team, and won some academic awards as well. And the way that I did it was there wasn't a single transformation. There were like 1,000 of them, but all of them were very tiny and small. And this is something that I mentioned at the end of Atomic Habits, which is that the holy grail of habit change and self-improvement is not a single 1% improvement, but 1,000 of them. And you can't say that getting 1% better on any given day will transform your life. But if you're committed to doing that day in and day out, whether it's as a student or a teacher or an individual, you can end up with a really incredible outcome at the end of the day.
So many of us teachers work with kids to help them set goals, but you say something remarkable on page 27 of the book. You say you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. What do you mean by that?
Well, for many years, I was a very goal-oriented person, and I would set goals for the grades I wanted to get in school, for the weights I wanted to lift in the gym, for the results I wanted in my business. And sometimes I would achieve them, but a lot of the time they wouldn't happen. And so it became clear to me at some point, after doing this for years, that setting a goal had very little to do with whether or not I achieved it. Setting a goal is fairly easy. All you have to do is sit down and think about it for 10 minutes. But whether or not I actually achieved a goal had much more to do with the system that I followed and the process that I put into place. And so I started to shift my focus from what kind of goals I wanted to achieve to what kind of systems I wanted to build. And I would say that this is where habits come into the picture and become essential, because your habits, the repeated routines that you follow each day, that's what makes up this system. There's sort of, and this is another reason why I chose the phrase atomic habits. On the one hand, the word atomic means very small or tiny, and I do believe in small changes, and we've already talked about that a little bit. But on the other hand, an atom is the smallest fundamental unit of a larger system. Atoms build into molecules, molecules build into compounds, and so on. And we could say the same thing about our habits. In many ways, our habits are the atoms of our lives. They're sort of the smallest fundamental unit, these repeated behaviors that we do each day. And when you put them all together, you can end up with whatever the system of your life is. And whatever results you're experiencing today, your current system is perfectly designed to produce your current results. It has to be, by definition. So if you want different results, the thing to change is not your goals or ambitions or your dreams. The thing to change is the system. Mm-hmm. And so that's where that shift in focus comes from.
And my listeners will know that I'm a big one on habits. People say, how do you teach full time and have a podcast and a blog and all the things? And I sit down and design my ideal week and then schedule the habits, because so many of us make appointments, one-time appointments here and there, but we forget that it's our daily habits that basically choose us. So we better intentionally choose them. Now, one thing you tackle is why it's so hard to change habits. I'll see a kid at the beginning of the year and they say, this year I'm going to have a great year. And I'll always say, well, what are you changing? Well, I'm just going to study harder. Okay, why does that not work?
Yeah, well, there are a variety of reasons why some habits stick and others fail, and I cover a lot of them in the book, but I'll just give you a few right now. So one thing is that people are often focused on changing the wrong thing. And so what I mean by that is we often try to build outcome-based habits. So we start with the result that we want. I want to get an A on the test, or I want to lose 40 pounds in the next 6 months, or I want to earn 6 figures this year, or whatever the outcome is. And then we back into a plan from there. We say, all right, okay, if I want to get an A, then here's my plan for studying. If I want to lose weight, here's my plan in the gym. And usually the conversation stops there. It stops with the result that you want and the plan that you have. But I think that there's actually one layer deeper, a level deeper of behavior change, which is your identity, or the set of values and principles, the beliefs that you have about yourself, your self-image. And the hard thing here is that this is like a two-way street. So once you adopt a certain identity or believe something about yourself, then you continue to act in accordance with that identity. But the identity got shaped from somewhere. It didn't just come out of thin air. And this is where I think the power shifts back into our own hands, which is that your habits provide evidence for the type of person that you want to become. So, for example, if you go to church every Sunday for 20 years, you believe that you're religious. If you study biology every Tuesday night for 30 minutes, then you believe that you are studious. Each action is like casting a vote for the type of person that you want to become. And as the votes accumulate and the evidence builds up, you start to believe something new about yourself. And so I think to answer your question, one reason habits often don't stick is because people are focused on achieving an outcome, but they're not focused on shifting the underlying belief behind it. And if you don't shift the belief, then you end up self-sabotaging. You don't follow through on the plan. So instead of saying, all right, I want to lose 40 pounds, so here's my workout plan, the question to ask yourself is, well, who's the type of person that could lose weight? Or who's the type of person that could get an A on this test? And then focus on fostering that identity rather than worrying about the outcome. So maybe the type of person who loses weight is the type of person who goes to the gym and doesn't miss workouts. So now your focus is on not missing workouts rather than worrying about the number on the scale. Or now your focus is on making sure you study for, maybe it's even only 5 minutes each day, but you're the type of person who studies every night. And once you build that identity, then often the results kind of come naturally.
Well, I love the quote. The goal is not to read a book, but to become a reader. And there is kind of a movement in education now that, we need to help our students, become readers, become mathematicians, and focus on our identity and who we want to become, instead of just saying, oh, we're all going to read every day. Because, in education, many of our kids have lost their joy. So you think that identity is kind of a key to help them unlock their joy, perhaps?
Well, there's something very different between saying I'm the type of person who wants this versus I'm the type of person who is this. So if you identify as I'm the type of person who is a reader, or I'm the type of person who is a writer, well, now you're not even really pursuing behavior change anymore. You're just acting in alignment with the type of person you already believe that you are. And so if you can help foster that sense of identity, if they can, rather than use the word joy, what I would say is if they can have a sense of pride in being that type of person, a sense of pride in being a reader, a sense of pride in being a writer, well, yeah, they're going to want to do it all day long because their identity is wrapped up in it. It's part of how they value themselves. Like habits may start because you provide some kind of incentive, the incentive of getting a good grade on the test or getting $5 if you get an A or whatever it happens to be, getting a sticker on the wall. But habits are only going to last if they become part of your identity. The incentive can get it started, but the identity is what makes it last.
Us teachers, 9 months out of the year, we work basically what everybody else does in a full year. So we tend to be in a burnout profession. A lot of us struggle with weight. A lot of teachers struggle with finances. I mean, there's so many things that come from being in a profession that is high burnout. What kind of things can we do to try to help ourselves achieve balance? How can we look at our habit?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question was simplifying. We just can't do everything. And I like the idea of looking at life as like a series of seasons. So, for example, I can't play any musical instruments. I would love to learn one. I would love to learn how to read music, but it's just not the right season for that right now. So I have to put it on the shelf. I also don't have children right now. So this is kind of like a heavy career season for me. And then once I do have kids, then I'll probably shift more into a family season, and maybe the career part will have to go on the back burner a little bit. So the trade-offs are different for each person, but I'd encourage you to think a little bit about like, what season am I in? And are there things that I'm doing right now that maybe don't fit as well with this season? And I just need to like wait and pursue those at a different time. So that's the first piece, is simplifying. But the second thing is, look, people are busy and teachers are asked to do a lot. And so as a result, like, you can't cut everything. So what can you do to make that easier? And the strategy that I really like to fall back on as as kind of a first defense is what I call environment design or choice architecture, which is you're doing two things. So I cover these in chapter 6 and chapter 12 of the book. So chapter 6 talks about making habits obvious. And any preschool teacher, kindergarten teacher will be familiar with the strategy, which is that like everything has a place in the classroom and things have very obvious labels. So you're trying to make the good habits as obvious as possible. Well, you do this for kids all the time, but you can do it for yourself as well. So, for example, when I wanted to eat more fruit and stop like munching on less healthy snacks, I bought a bowl, like a display bowl, and placed it right in the middle of the kitchen counter. And then whenever I bought, apples or bananas or whatever, they would go in there so that I would see them. And I was way more likely to eat them. Before I had that, it sounds like such a simple change, but I was putting fruits down in the crisper in the bottom of the fridge, and I wouldn't think about them because they were out of sight. And then they go bad after 2 weeks and I'd be throwing them out. And so the only change I made was making it more obvious. So that's a little example of environment design. I did the same thing with flossing. For a long time, I wouldn't floss, and I'd have it tucked away in the drawer in the bathroom. And so instead, I bought a little bowl, put it right next to the toothbrush, and then bought some of those pre-made flossers and put it right next to them so that the environment was primed for the habit that I wanted to build.
Love that. So James Clear, and the book is Atomic Habits. He also has Habits Academy. It's a fantastic newsletter that I highly recommend. I hope that we're all motivated to understand that, goals are important. And when you choose a goal, make sure you choose the habits that go with that goal. But I think the big takeaway I have, James, is just re-examining my identity as I approach those habits. I think that we've got some great suggestions, including environment design, that all of us teachers can take a look at. Thanks, James. Today's sponsor is Project Pals. Project Pals has a useful classroom collaborative platform that lets you create and manage projects for your students. Right now, my students are creating and managing a project as they're creating a podcast to record powerful stories from the recent storms in our area. Project Pals connects with Google Classroom, but also lets me see the detail on which students are contributing and participating. I also love the task board, which is a Trello-like Kanban board that lets students create, assign, and complete tasks. You can also link in Google Docs and do brainstorming and so much more. It's really a very powerful tool. I will be featuring this tool on my blog and newsletter this week. So go to projectpals.com. That's projectpals.com and sign up today.
Thank you for listening to the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast. You can download the show notes and see the archive at coolcatteacher.com/podcast. Never stop learning.